Gil and Brenda, welcome to the show.
Hello, Noel.
Nice to see you.
You know, I'm really excited to have you guys as part of our guests because I think the topic that you guys are going to be discussing with us today is one that is pretty prevalent in our society, and more of our families are becoming what you would refer to as blended. And, you know, I think it's one of those things where there's not a lot out there when you move into this stage of your life, and yet there's a lot of questions that come up. And so hopefully today we can really drill down to some very practical takeaways that can be used in our blended family situations. So I'm going to start with, you know, kind of this whole, let's learn a little bit about you guys, because I think your story is unique enough to kind of share with our audience, if you're open to that, about how this journey has arrived.
No, we're not open. No, we're
You guys are pretty close to this. You just wrote a book on it, though, right?
Yeah.
You know?
That's the show. Huh? Cool. Well, you're ladies first. Go ahead.
wow. Well, we've been married. It'll be 13 years in January, but technically 12 years. But I love what Gil came up with. It's called remarried math. So do you want to share how that goes?
Yeah, for those that are remarried, they'll usually get this, but remarried math levels the playing field a little bit with all those people who've been married for, in our age category, sometimes 35 years or longer. But remarried math works this way, Noel. You take the number of children you have together, in our case, 7 children. I had 4, she had 3. You take that by the number of years you've been married. In our case, 12 years. So 12 times 7 is 84. So she looks pretty good for about 105.
Yeah, I think so. And having all those children.
Yeah, so yeah. There's your opener. How's that?
So I'll tell you what, you guys are like, I mean, if you go by years married, and if you go by your equation, you guys are the definition of experts in the space.
Yeah, like dog years or something. I don't know.
I mean, you know, I always refer to in these seminars that we lead, the couple's been married the longest are the experts in the room. So any difficult questions that come up, I just say, go talk to them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we have you on the show. You know, I guess I'll just jump right into addressing the elephant in the room. Blended marriage. Any marriage is tough, but then you throw in blended, and I think there's a whole new set of issues and challenges that come up when we're talking about that type of couple and family. Can you guys just address some of the big challenges that I think many blended families can relate to, that you guys have walked through and you've maybe shared that journey with others?
Well, I'd like to just start by saying new statistics show that there's 72 differences between a remarriage and a first-time marriage. So realizing that, it's like, wow, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot going on. What would you say would be the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, wow. I mean, the biggest challenges obviously are the kids, because they have such an impact upon the marriage. But frankly, if you don't have a strong marriage in a blended family, it's probably not going to last for long, because the statistics of a remarriage holding together, typically it's those first 2 years that are the toughest, because things are accelerated. So you're dealing with a lot of issues, let alone shame, guilt, potentially unforgiveness of yourself or the one that betrayed you if you were the leavor or the leavee. There's all kinds of challenges right out of the chute. And the honest thing is a lot of times couples get remarried because rescue me, or it'll all be better, or the rose-colored glasses come in. And
so I think I just want to jump in, and I want to address this topic of the challenges of first marriages versus second and third marriages. I think that's the real issue here, is that there's challenges regardless of whether you've been married 1 time or 2 or 3 times, but there are different types of challenges that exist. So can you guys kind of help our audience and listeners understand the differences between the two?
Yeah, good question. First of all, there's actually 72 differences between a remarriage and a first-time marriage. So there's things that remarried couples are dealing with that weren't even on our radar when we were first married. One being the kids.
right.
That's obvious. But I think we go into a remarriage a lot of times thinking that we want to be happy again. And then we put the rose-colored glasses on and feel like, well, I found love. Everything's going to be great. Yeah. And that doesn't always happen.
Well, let alone that, but the others, other things that are in that 72 differences. I mean, you've got a whole different thing with regards to child support, alimony, kids coming and going, in-laws, ex-laws, former spouses. These are things that a remarriage encounters that first-time marriages wouldn't even have an idea that they would even encounter. So it adds a lot of stress to the marriage and the kids especially, let alone the issue of did people deal with grief? Did they deal with shame? Did they deal with guilt? Did they deal with forgiveness issues? Those are huge matters that have a great impact on this new marriage. And if not navigated in a loving and careful way, it's going to have an impact yet again on the new marriage. And,
Yeah.
Sometimes I think early on it was almost like, why don't I have my ex just write your ex the support check and just get us out of the middle?
Yeah, get us out of the middle.
Wow. And yet I think for many of our listeners who are in this blended marriage, oftentimes what they will share with us is that as much as they want to move on because they've found love and they're trying to work on this new relationship, which is exciting, and yet there's almost like this haunting past that they can't get beyond. And what would be some of the strategies that you would offer to those couples in terms of dealing with their past trauma, the emotions of their past relationship, as they try to move forward in their newfound love together?
Well, the immediate thing that comes to my mind that we address in our book is we refer to those as phantoms. And phantoms can be literally like a missing limb because you were connected to that former spouse before. And literally, you may not, if your arm, God forbid, was amputated, but in a divorce or if someone is widowed, it's like having an amputation. And those phantoms can really hurt still. I think probably one of the biggest deals is the issue of forgiveness that comes to my mind, of yourself or of whoever was the leavor or the leavee. But your heart is not free to love yet again and live well if you haven't really put to rest those phantoms, in a certain way of saying it. What would you add?
Well, and I think another statistic is 58% of people haven't dealt with their past pain before they've committed to a new relationship. So another example of phantom is we've come up with a term called bare wire or sneaker wave or old tapes, new tapes.
Yeah.
And early on, Gil might say something to me and it would really tick me off and I'd be distant and not nice to him, and he would think it's his problem, and finally we talked through this and realized he had said something to me that kind of was a bare wire in me of something that happened in my past. And I was reacting to that feeling. It had nothing to do with him. So a lot of times that happens is we're dealing with our past stuff, and it's not your fault, it's my issue that I need to kind of work through. So early on, if either one of us would be distant with each other or seem a little gruff, we gave each other the freedom to say, man, you just hit a bare wire. And that gave us freedom to come alongside each other with compassion and say, wow, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Tell me about that. What does that mean to you? And that just built a level of trust and honesty with each other, and that safety that is so important in a remarriage.
Well, and I think to add to that, Brenda, is for guys especially, because we aren't so good about putting our emotions into words. A lot of these things that I was understanding, I would write them down. And if I personally could label the thing that I could actually go, well, this is how I'm feeling, and label it, then I could potentially then conquer it rather than it conquering us. So then if there was a sharing of an episode that was ramping up between us that had to do with my past, but yet it was impacting our present, from emotions to memories to, all kinds of things. So those phantoms come up literally and can steal the peace in the family if we don't have a game plan in the front of those circumstances coming, because they will come, and they will come when you least expect them.
Yeah. So, you guys reference this new lingo that I think a lot of our listeners might be saying, well, what's a bare wire and what's a foxhole and what's, a sneaker wave? Can you guys, I love that approach, because I think what you were saying, Gil, is that being able to have that vocabulary of maybe labeling this, you can actually speak to what's really going on versus all the emotional stuff that oftentimes gets swept into these conversations. For our listeners, maybe just help them understand these. I think what you're meaning by bare wire and sneaker wave is the conflict triggers that happen in the relationship.
Absolutely. A bare wire in a psychological term is basically what they would refer to as an attachment injury. And if that injury isn't, so to say, dressed in salve and gauze to let it heal, then it's just going to sit out there like a bare wire. And every time you touch it, you're going to get shocked. Now, in guys' cases, we may have one wire and you might get shocked. But in women's cases, if they have a bare wire, it's not just one bare wire, it's the entire fuse box. So you're going to get electrocuted. So, if you understand that and can get ahead of it, ideally not isolate yourself, because if you're isolated and aren't in that place of being able to communicate, as any good soldier knows, if they can isolate the enemy, they can take them out. But if there's community and you have one another's back, you can fight any battle.
So what's this? I mean, so I understand that, but like sneaker wave, that's an interesting concept. What is that? What does that represent in the relationship?
Well, that's an emotional connection to the past. So let me just give you an example of what we share in our seminar. It was a couple months into our marriage, and we were taking our kids on a triple F vacation, which is forced family fun.
Yeah, they were all a bunch of teenagers, and they did not want to go.
Oh, I love that.
We have 7 kids, 5 were in the home, all preteens and teenagers. It's just crazy in itself. So anyway, long story short, we went to a vacation home, with all the kids, have all this bonding time. As we got settled in, I just started to cry and just was like, where is all this emotion coming from? I usually can put my head down and let's just get through this. And it really kind of overwhelmed me. And Gil thought something was wrong with me.
What did I do?
Yeah, or his kids.
What did my kids do?
That started stress and conflict between us. And finally, I was able to take a step back and realize that, wow, what am I doing here with this new family? Because it's just been a couple months.
New situation.
I'm supposed to be here with just my kids and my first husband, because that's how it's supposed to be. So what I was experiencing was the grief of the loss of what I felt was supposed to be. And I didn't want to tell Gil once I realized that, because I thought, oh, then I don't want him to think that I don't love him or I don't want to be here, because that's not it at all. But the idea that, is he going to be safe enough for me to say this? So as I was explaining it to him, I was like, I'm just unpacking, I'm minding my own business. And all of a sudden, this emotion just came out of nowhere and knocked me out. And that's when he said, boy, it sounds like you got hit with a sneaker wave. And it's like, that's it.
Wow.
That's what it felt like. So early on in our years, and even sometimes now, I'll come home and go, man, I got nailed by a sneaker wave today. And he knows how to come alongside, and we can talk about it.
The thing that these terms evoke, Noel, is empathy. If the couple can have empathy for one another from their past and bring that empathy into the present, then the couple gets stronger. But if there's no empathy, it's like, no, what's your problem? Well, that's from my past. It's still bugging me. Well, get over it. Well, I can't. But if I have empathy in this new marriage, then we get stronger and the past gets weaker. But if we don't make room for that to happen, it's going to cause trouble. And it'll be accelerated because you don't have time to gear up in a second marriage. It's happening right now. It's like jumping onto a moving train. It's in full motion right now. So hopefully that helps.
It really does. And, I think that you talk about empathy as being core to the couple moving forward, but I think it's core to any relationship in terms of being able to heal. It's that part that I think is oftentimes missing in terms of healing, right? Because if we can be empathetic towards one another, there's a level of being able to offer something that no one else can offer our spouse, and we're really the only ones that can deliver on that.
Right.
Out of all those triggers, which ones would you say are the most difficult to manage in the relationship? Is it the sneaker wave? Is it the bare wire? I mean, as you've spent a lot of time working with couples.
Well, there's no. I want to go. The one for men is a term called open doors. And open doors has to do with vulnerability and my weakness. And I don't want to be weak.
Yeah.
But the level of intimacy and strength in a marriage is measured by the level of vulnerability that's happening here. So the more vulnerable, and a man has to lead the way, because that's what the wife is really desiring. Not that a wife doesn't be vulnerable as well, because we need our women's strength. But for men, I think that's the big one, is the vulnerability.
It's just as important for women to give men a safe place to be vulnerable. Because if my man, any man, shares once or twice and his wife comes back and puts him down, well, that's stupid.
I ain't sharing again.
Why am I going to be a safe place?
Nope.
So it's both of us. We both have to be able to allow a safe place for each other. And that's scary, especially if that's been obliterated in your previous relationship.
Oh, the past thing?
But what we're talking about is now.
Right.
And I'm not going anywhere.
I wasn't either.
So we're in this for the long haul. So we have the rest of our life to figure this out. It's going to be tough, but life is, and it's not even about us anymore. It's about our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want your kids to have the type of marriage that they see that you have right now?
Oh, you're gonna
Yeah,
drop
that's
that
so
bomb.
good.
Well,
Okay.
and that's the question. I mean, come on, you guys, grow up. You're adults. Get the, with all the oxygen for your relationship material that, Stronger Families has. There's so much stuff out there to be healthy. We need to not be prideful, say, hey, I need help. So many times it's just a little bit of tweaking
Yeah.
that a marriage needs to take it from like a scale of 1 to 10, a 2 to an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well, and I
the
think
little
what-
things.
What you're saying is so helpful because it's identifying what they're dealing with. It's like the couple who can verbalize, well, we fight a lot. Well, that's how they verbalize it. But really what's going on is there's a whole lot of other layers happening in the
Oh, yeah.
relationship, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think the thing that what I hear oftentimes from blended families is not, and especially the marriage, it's not so much about us, because we're figuring this out together. Like
Yeah.
we're committed. Like I love what you guys say. We're not going anywhere. This is a lifetime deal. The issue that comes up over and over again, I'm sure this is very familiar to you, is not us. It's the exes and the boundaries that are no longer. We're having so many issues with boundaries being crossed over from our past. What would you say to that couple in terms of helping them move forward and not allow the exes to demolish what's so good about this new relationship?
Move to an island. No.
Yeah.
And can we come?
Yeah, turn off all technology and just go away. That term, let's talk about foxholes.
Okay.
Foxholes are basically something, as we all know, that you dig in haste to get out of the line of fire so you don't get shot up. So what you're talking about is circumstances that are usually circumstantial, and if the ex still has not dealt with their stuff, then they're going to tend to go on the attack mode, and they're going to start shooting at you because you're possibly moving forward and growing up or letting go or dealing with forgiveness issues. Okay, so that foxhole happens. That means that when the foxhole happens, we both get down in it. I don't leave her up there to deal with her ex by herself. Mm-hmm. We've had couples come to us at seminars and they'll talk about situations that I distinctly remember a lady literally dragging her husband up to talk to us at a break and telling us about a situation where an ex-spouse was going off on him or her, I can't remember exactly which, over issues of the kids. And she was left up to deal with his ex-wife while he was down in the foxhole, avoiding dealing with the oncoming fire, the shrapnel. And it was like, dude, what are you doing? Get her down. And in those circumstances, it's kind of come down together in the foxhole, strategize about it, come to Jesus for a moment, get real with one another, protect one another, and then come up out of the foxhole, because it's just going to keep on coming. If you know how to draw the boundaries together and you have a united front, then those foxholes, you get tougher to get picked off. Because we talk about another term called the wall, which is more of a long-term concept, where foxholes are short intervals of quick battles, where the wall, that whole concept is built to protect the marriage for the long haul. And when you see those battles coming, you say, rather than having it become a fight between us, you come behind that wall that you're building for one another, which is a whole nother concept.
But the key is that we've got each other's back.
Yeah.
Because I trust him, and I know that he's going to watch my back, and I'm going to watch his. And when we're together as a team, not only the exes see it, but the kids see it.
Oh, yeah.
Because the kids, when we got remarried, whenever a remarriage happens, it's another death for them,
another loss,
another grieving process that a lot of times we don't look at kids as grieving that way. And that could come out in the kids with anger, rebellion, all kinds of stuff. Because seeing us together means their bio parents aren't together. So a lot of times the kids are in cahoots with the ex. I mean, it can get very complicated.
Yeah.
And that's why we've got to be on the same team. We've got to be on the same page and stand strong.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that. I think the analogy that comes to my mind is it's the question, are you going to be adversarial towards one another, or you're going to be advocates of one another? And I think that's a choice you have to step into every single day and say, this is my advocate, and I am going to advocate on their behalf in this united front, versus we're adversarially going at it, right?
Right.
Because the problem's not usually about the spouse, your spouse. The problem's usually outside of the relationship. So huge.
Which is the matter of the concept of building the wall, because the wall can come between you, or it can be out in front of you to protect you. So as soon as you start seeing the adversarial circumstances come up, you can kind of go, hey, let's get behind our wall. And that is definitely the opposition out there. Not you good?
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm
then
good.
let's fight the battle out there, because that's why we got married. We're companions. I like you. I want you to like me. It's kind of like, let's have how are we going to reframe this thing so that it doesn't end up becoming a wall between us?
Yeah. Let's move from the exes to the kids, because I think that's the next big topic that comes up. Is, here you have your biological kids and your adopted kids, or your stepkids. And it's almost like, where's the boundaries of the parenting role, and what's permissible, what's not permissible? What would you say to couples? How do you keep a united front when you're dealing with a blended children?
Get on an island by yourself.
We in the book we lovingly refer to the children as those people, because it's like, what are those people doing? What are those people leaving? When are they coming back? What are those people doing? Because in most cases, statistically, a remarriage, usually it can be really strong, but they tend to break up more about the issues over the kids than they do sometimes the marriage. And literally, we have seen that time and time again work out to where the marriage, basically, the remarriage fell apart because of the children coming in. I mean, kids, even in a first-time marriage, try to divide and conquer. You might as well multiply it by 1,000,000 if things are not handled well in a remarriage and a blended family. And so the ability to, again, have a strong front.
Well, also to realize average time for a family to blend, if they ever do, is 7 years.
Whoa, really?
So and you hit that 1 and 2 year mark and you're like, okay, I'm ready to get out of here. I'm big and a bail.
Yeah.
Just if you hang in there.
Just keep in mind, you're just getting started at the 2 year mark.
Wow, that's
huge. You're just getting started. So, the nature of, the kids, because there's some really wild situations out there. I mean,
can you guys give me a story?
67 different types of step families, 67 different types.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of going, you got to be kidding me. That's tough enough to navigate, let alone the 72 differences in a remarriage. Then you mix in kids coming and going, and the hurt and the anguish. Literally, those children may be moving back and forth between literally 2 different countries that have totally different cultures. And that in of it themselves makes it even more difficult for them to navigate. Then you have to find out, well, who are they going to take it out on? Right. Usually the couple that's the strongest and the stablest is going to get hit the hardest. Because they're stable to take the kids. I don't know if there's any other easy way to say it. The kids are going to deal out a lot of crap. And if you're not ready to take it, don't get started in this journey.
Well, so if it's okay, I would love to ask, how did you guys handle it? I mean, a real life story of, you both had, sets of kids coming into this relationship. How did you go about parenting? Do you have any stories that kind of would help relate to the audience of those who are blended? I'm sure you do.
I'm on this island thing. No, it's like we need an island to get away. I think one thing that really helped is that as we would take kids back and forth from our house to our ex's house, That time is so precious. To be able to listen to the kid's heart, where are they at, let them know what's come up, what has happened at the house. They're coming back to our home, what's happened while they've been gone, kind of get them up to speed. Some kids in that transition, they may need to go sit and have some quiet time in their room for a little bit just to kind of decompress. I mean, we would see our kids, whenever they'd come back from their other parents' house, you could just see that they were different.
Yeah.
So to give them that space and that time to just kind of decompress and change gears, because especially if each household is being run differently, some might be the Disneyland dad or
Right.
mom with no rules, whatever, and then your stability. Think of what those kids are having to go through.
Two other thoughts that come to my mind. We took it upon ourselves to build a safe place for the children to say whatever they needed to say, even if it was ugly at us. Not that it was disrespectful, that was not allowed. But we literally, early on and through the years, we would literally take intervals of time where we would take each kid aside with just Brenda and I, go to our little room. Everybody would sit on the floor, so we're all on the same level, and we would give that kid the permission to say whatever was really bugging them, and that they knew that they would not be judged or put down. Now, typically, the idea there is usually start with the one that's the most talkative, and then that way you get an idea of what's really going on. So that takes some guts, because you might hear some things you don't want to hear, and all you can really say is I'm sorry and thank you. We'll try better.
Yeah.
So that helps us to know what they're dealing with in our home as well as in the other home. The other thing I would say to couples is, and this again takes a lot of bravery, and dads, stepdads, you can have such influence by doing something very simple, and that is simply state the obvious. So in my home, one particular Saturday morning, Brenda was off for coffee with a girlfriend, and here I am looking at five almost all teenagers at this point in time. I don't know what in God's name I was thinking about, but I'm going to take this on. And so I literally sat them all down, my kids and Brenda's kids, and I said something very profound. It's kind of stupid, actually. But the profanity of it was this: stepsons, I'm not your dad, but I am the father in this home. And your mom is always going to be your mom, and I'm going to love her the best I can. And then I turned to my own children and I said, and Brenda's not your mom, but she is the mom in this house, and she's going to do the best she can. And you guys, when you come in this house, this is supposed to be a safe zone. So if there's any territorialism, we're not going to play that game.
Wow.
And that didn't change everything, because believe you me, they tested that. And that was the conversation I went back to every time. That was and because kids are going to push boundaries.
Sure.
So why not
That's their job.
That's their job. They're supposed to. So why not go ahead and state the obvious of what the boundaries are and who people are, so that they understand their role.
Yeah.
And then if they step outside of that, it's like, well, I love you, but don't do that.
Right. Well, and I think when you talk about that, creating a place of safety, really it's also creating a place of humility. Because I think the best thing that kids can see is parents who walk in that place of, hey, I need to ask for forgiveness, and I'm sorry, and I'll do better. That spirit of humility can go a long way in terms of reconciling the dynamics that are there. Not just blended, but any marriage when we step into that place with our kids. Well, I love this. This is so practical, but I got to take it one step further. So we talked about the exes. We were talking about stepchildren. What about the dynamic of stepchildren and biological children all of a sudden being in the same home together? I could only imagine the vying for, territory, and this is my space, not your space. How did you guys navigate that?
Well, I think when we got married, Gil and his kids moved into the house I had, and we added on. So that way everybody kind of had their own space. I mean, ideally it's nice to start fresh, but sometimes you can't always do that. Yeah. So I think by everybody having their own space is huge. If you're in a situation where bedrooms have to be shared, there needs to be clear dividing line, so to speak. It's like when Johnny's not here, we can't touch his stuff unless we have permission, because that way you're showing respect to the kids.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of anything specific. Gil would always reorganize everybody's shoes because they'd be all over the house. So he still gets kidded about
Yeah, I still get kidded about that.
But I like that. I mean, I think the space issue is a big one, especially teenagers. It's like, what do you mean you're invading my territory? This is my home. Just because you guys decided to get together, I don't need to be friendly to these new siblings, right?
And if you think about it, just where they are in their pattern of growth. I mean, teenagers are trying to be independent. We're trying to give them responsibility because we want them to grow up to be responsible people to move out, right?
Right.
Yeah, leave
So there's
early, now.
There's this tension of, come here, we got to bond. We all got to love each other really quick. And they're like, I'm out of here. Give me my space. So that's how we kind of came up with the triple F nights, which is forced family fun. And that we respected the teenagers enough to say, okay, we know you're busy, we have a lot going on, but 2 weeks from Friday night, we're all going to get together, no matter what. And sometimes we have a little pushback, but it's like, no, we need to do this, and we'd go do something fun.
Or
Or
another way to build bonds between complete strangers, and especially strangers that might be territorial and maybe even adversarial, is, as parents, create a false emergency or a false tragedy or a false tragedy of some sort that everybody has to bond together. This was actually tested out in a group home where kids that are incorrigible came in, and they would have a fabricated plumbing problem where kids had to go underneath the house and fix the leak with all the dead bugs and stuff, and they had to bond together. And time again, they would, and it would literally change the atmosphere of the home.
Wow.
So in a step family where there's territorialism, and it can be adversarial. And to build that place of safety, that actually, we had a situation to where it wasn't quite that bad. It was a true tragedy, but an event that they all had to bond together. And then, after
camping is always good for
camping
that.
is a good one.
That's a
But
good one.
too long to have a story to go
we were
into.
eating, there's water coming down through the ceiling, and we all kind of bonded over
Yeah,
that.
that was a real plumbing problem, and they all dove in and helped out. But as the kids grew, that got tested. This was not Disneyland. There were a few circumstances where one of my biological kids crossed the line with one of my stepsons financially and had stolen some money, and it was ugly. And it's taken years for that to mend.
But it did.
But it did, because we didn't condemn, but we didn't ignore it.
Yeah.
And that's probably the toughest thing in step families and dealing with kids, is to not condemn them, even though you're kind of like, dang, you're stupid. Why did you do that?
Right.
It's because they're a teenager. Their brain hasn't developed yet,
Yeah.
But the ability to build that safety for them and not to condemn them, but to encourage them and to correct in a teaching moment. So there's a zillion situations out there with kids. So I hopefully those are a couple good suggestions.
That's really, really helpful. You guys how long have you guys been married? I know that you have the dog year, 108 years, but real years. How many
years? It'll be 12 years in January.
13.
It'll be 13 in January.
13. So as you reflect back over 13 years of walking out this book, is there anything that you would say is the capstone of why you've been able to make it this far?
Forgiveness. Forgive them, forgive yourself.
And so I got to press a little bit deeper, because I think we all understand the value of forgiveness, but depending on the offense and the situation, that's not always.
If you don't forgive, the offenses will define you. And if they define you, it will ruin your future, because you will live in the past. And if the past isn't dealt with, it will cripple you. And the only way out of that prison is through forgiveness.
Wow.
And forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened to you.
Thank
and it
you.
doesn't mean you have to be best friends with that person. It's more of an internal acknowledgement of, you know what? I'm going to let that go. I don't wish them any harm. And like we sign our books, always forward. Always got to be moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's scars. I mean, you don't get through this life without scars, and you don't get through a divorce and remarriage or a widowhood without scars. There were good years, Noel. I mean, my first marriage was 24 years, and there were some really good years. The last 4 years were hell. And there were a lot of scars. But I think one of the most pivotal things I understood that was from the perspective of why I wanted to forgive was because from those scars grew courage to step into it. Rather than to run the other way, it was, let me embrace this, so that out of that courage and those wounds, I gained something.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Well, what we've been talking about is Restored and Remarried. And one of the things I love about the way that you guys wrote this book is that you didn't just write a book, you also wrote a workbook that makes it very practical and really taking the concepts and saying, how do we apply this immediately to our relationship? And so for all the listeners, all this information, how to get the book, how to get the workbook, and even to maybe join Gil and Brenda at one of their seminars, we'll have that right below the video. And I can't encourage you enough to go pick this up. If you are in a blended family, this will help. We've had many families that have gone through. This is one of the things that we recommend out of Oxygen for our blended families, saying, hey, you need to get Restored and Remarried. It's a game changer in your relationship. So Gil and Brenda, thank you for being on the show and for your courageous effort to help so many of these families that are in a new season and in a place where they're vulnerable and yet looking for answers. And ultimately, I think what the bottom line is hope, that there is hope in their relationship. You can make it. You can be successful the second or third time around. You can have fun.
Have fun.
That's good, because you might be from fun country, right?
I'm trying.
You're trying. You're working that way. Okay, gotcha. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show, you guys.
Great. Thanks.
It's been an honor.
All right. Take care.